Widower shovels older bedridden neighbor's yard daily. One day he doesn't find her inside. Story of the day. As Noah sat at the kitchen table in his new home, he couldn't help but wonder how his life had taken a strange turn in the past few months. 6 months ago, he lost his wife to cancer and embraced the role of a single dad. Chris, Tim, and Harry were quiet, obedient children, yet Noah struggled to balance parenting and work. He was a teacher, and one day, he got a job offer from a small school in a remote district. The working hours were less, and the pay wasn't great, but Noah accepted it, hoping to find a better balance in life. I guess it wasn't all bad, he told himself when the doorbell rang. When he answered the door, he found an older woman in his doorway. She was holding a cherry pie in her hands, and a small smile appeared on her lips as she saw him. "Hi there, young man," she said cheerfully. "I'm Mrs. Garner, and I live next door to you. You see, it's nice to have new friends, so I thought I should pay a visit. Here, this is for you and your little children," she added, extending the pie. "Oh, that's really sweet of you," Noah said shyly, accepting it. "I'm Noah, by the way. Thanks for the pie. Would you like some tea?" "I'd love that. Thank you," she said, smiling. So Noah served her tea and cookies and told her he had relocated to a new house after his wife's death. "That must be tough for you," said Mrs. Garner apologetically. "But that job opportunity sounds good. I'm glad you're taking it." "Thanks," Noah said. "It's a bit lonely here, though. Like, I don't know anyone, and my kids. I don't feel safe leaving them alone." "Oh, darling, then you could use the help," Mrs. Garner advised. "I live alone and got nobody. How about I help you out?" "Thanks, but are you sure? I don't want to burden you." "Always. I'm always happy to help," Mrs. Garner replied. "Speaking of which," Noah paused. "I noticed your yard needs shoveling. I moved here a week ago, and I see you don't have help. How about I clear it for you?" "Oh," she laughed. "I'm an old bird, darling, and I don't need it." "Please," he insisted. "I want to do it for you." "Well, if you insist, then it's all right." "Thank you, Noah." So Noah began shoveling Mrs. Garner's yard daily, and soon, they became good friends. He knew she was fragile and lonely, and needed help, so he visited her often and helped her out. One morning, Noah was late in shoveling the snow, and Mrs. Garner broke her hip after slipping on the ice. He dialed 911 immediately and stayed by her side until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, Mrs. Garner was bedridden and couldn't move. Noah and his 3 little superheroes took care of the elderly lady, bringing her hot meals and listening to her wonderful stories. Noah also taught Mrs. Garner how to walk again, hoping to motivate her to get out of bed and out of the house. Sometimes, he wondered why there were no family photos in her home, and he once tried asking her about it, but she teared up, and he didn't ask her anything further. One day, Noah stopped by her house for dinner and was perplexed when she asked him to stop helping her out. "Are you all right, Mrs. Garner?" he asked, confused. "Is something bothering you?" "Oh, what would bother an old lady like me? I just want to stay in my house, and I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Mrs. Garner," Noah explained gently. "I'm happy to help you, just like you helped me with my children. And all our hard work will go in vain if you don't start walking again. I want to help you." With tears in her eyes, Mrs. Garner said, "You have a beautiful heart, darling. Thank you for everything you are doing for me." "No problem, Mrs. Garner. I'm just returning your favor," Noah told the older woman that day. That morning, Noah was surprised when he didn't find her home. He had a spare key, so he could access Mrs. Garner's house. Suddenly, he saw a young man peeking into the yard. "Yes," shouted Noah from the front porch. "Do you need something?" The man tensed up. Well, who are you?" he asked. "I'm the owner's neighbor," Noah introduced himself. "And you are?" "I'm Peter," said the man. "I'm her son, actually." I was just checking out what work is needed here before the house is sold. Peter told Noah that he had shifted Mrs. Garner to a nursing home and was listing her house for sale. Noah asked him for the nursing home address and why he never visited her, and Peter said, "I moved here last week for a job opportunity, and my wife and children need me. Mom's been needing a lot of help recently, you know what I mean, right? I can't be there for her as I got a family of my own, so I shifted her to a care home." Noah felt bad that Mrs. Garner's son didn't care about her and suddenly remembered how depressed she had been a week ago. When he visited her, she sobbed into his shoulders, explaining how lonely she felt after her husband died and Peter moved out. Noah insisted that she move in with him and his children, but she refused, saying she didn't want to bother him. But when he returned the next day with his children and tried to persuade her again, she couldn't say no. "You've been family to us, Mrs. Garner," Noah told her. "And we never considered you a liability. We would love to have you home." So while she was rejected by her son, Noah and his children gave a loving home to Mrs. Garner. And Peter got a taste of his own medicine soon. When Noah went to pick up his children from school, he met Peter outside the principal's office and learned Peter's daughter was very disrespectful to the teachers and other elders. "Well, kids do what they see," Noah told him angrily as he walked away with the kids, and Peter was embarrassed about what he had done. He showed up on Noah's porch a few days later and apologized to Mrs. Garner for not being a good son. With time, Peter changed for the better, and he checks on Mrs. Garner often now.